Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm glad you could be with us this morning for our November edition of Breakfast Briefing. I'm Jessica Wagner, Manager of Workforce and Economic Development at the Chamber, where I am this morning. Today, we are taking a 150-year journey of flight with a company that is now the global leader in advanced aircraft propeller design and manufacturing, and they do it all from just up the road on 75 in Piqua. Before we take off, though, I need to always thank our sponsors, in particular 3 series sponsors, Benefits Network Insurance, Pickerel, Schaefer, and Ebling, and CareWorks. And our featured sponsor this morning is Benefits Network Insurance, a division of Risk Strategies. And so now I would like to invite Anthony Ciccato from B&I to say a few words. Good morning, Anthony.
Morning, Jessica. Thanks. And for a lot of you, I'm sure you probably heard of me before. I used to come back when they were in person to the breakfast briefings, but and I've done one of these before. But yeah, we are the kind of partner with the Dayton Chamber and do a lot of the benefits for a lot of the smaller businesses, 50 employees and less. And with the time of the year that it is right now, it's a lot of companies primary or up there, if not primary focus, while we're wrapping up the end of the year here. So the program that's offered through the Chamber is a very good program. They've expanded it to even sole proprietors now, and it is called the SACA Benefit Program. And if you guys have any questions, I'm going to leave my information. I'll put it in the comments so everyone can see it. But if you have to pay to shop, if you haven't already come up with a decision, or you are in the market, feel free to, we'd love to give you a second opinion if nothing else. So Anthony Ciccato with Benefits Network. Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Anthony. And yeah, you can always reach out to the Chamber and we'll get you in contact with Anthony as well, because obviously we want to make sure you learn more and potentially save some money. Thanks again, Anthony, and to all our sponsors. Some quick logistics. Most of you who've been on this webinar before, you know that we want you to ask questions, so please utilize the questions box. JJ, our speaker, is ready for your questions, so put them there and I'll get through as many as I can. We are recording this webinar, and instructions on how to access it and your member hub will be sent a little bit later on. And now for the main event. We've all heard, especially if you've grown up here, that the Wright brothers are synonymous with flight. But there is another family that is equally important in the journey of aviation. Hartzell Propeller can trace its history of flight to 1914, when a relationship between Orville Wright and Robert Hartzell led to the manufacture of the first Hartzell airplane in 1917. But just as the science of flight evolved, so did Hartzell, which now has a propeller system for hovercrafts and wing-in-ground craft. And the man responsible for all of that and more is JJ Frigge, who actually started his career at Hartzell in 2011 before taking over the day-to-day operations, which I'm sure didn't include a pandemic, and he's going to touch on that a little bit with us this morning. So JJ Frigge, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Jessica. It's great to be with you and everyone out there. I want to just welcome everybody and hope everybody's having a good Friday the 13th and ready for a nice weekend here in Ohio. So I'm going to go into presentation mode, and Jessica, does that look right?
Yes, looks good.
Great. So as Jessica said, I certainly don't claim that we are as influential as the Wright brothers, but we did start back in 1917 with a partnership with Orville Wright. So just wanted to, again, welcome everybody, and I wanted to spend maybe 30 minutes or so walking through a little bit about who we are and what we do here at Hartzell Propeller up in Piqua, Ohio. So there's a shot of our facility here in Piqua. And as Jessica mentioned, really the Hartzell family has been in business in Piqua for really about 150 years or so. And tracing all the way back to the 1860s, the Hartzell business started as a wagon and lightning rod business and got into really hardwoods around the turn of the 20th century. And so through that time period, the family owned and operated the facilities here in Piqua. but actually lived down in Oakwood, right next to the Wright brothers' house down in Oakwood. And so as that friendship grew in the Oakwood area with the Wright brothers, Robert Hartzell at that time was the younger son of George Hartzell, who was running the business. And Robert wanted to be a barnstormer, and George didn't necessarily want him to do that, wanted him to get into the family business. And so they struck up a conversation with Orville. And at that time, Orville was running the Dayton Wright Airplane Company. And George volunteered Robert to start making propellers. So that's really how the partnership with the Wright brothers came about, as next door neighbors, and trying to keep Robert from being a barnstormer and traveling across the country flying an airplane. So 1917 was the foundation of the propeller business, which again was really a division of some of the other hardwood businesses that were running here in Piqua. Fast forward all the way to 1981, and the propeller division was still running sort of autonomously within Hartzell Industries, and that part of the business was sold off to TRW, which is obviously a big global public company. TRW held Hartzell Prop for about 6 years and decided it wasn't the best strategic fit for their aerospace business. Obviously, Hartzell Propeller more in the general aviation sector than commercial aviation. And they sold Hartzell Propeller to Jim Brown Jr. And Jim Brown Jr. was a naval aviator. He flew aircraft off of carriers during the Korean War, and had been a lifelong aviation enthusiast, a businessman up in the Cleveland area, and moved his family down to Piqua in 1987 and started started ownership with Hartzell Propeller. The Brown family still owns our propeller business today. Jim Brown III and Joe Brown are our co-owners, and they've both had stints as president. As recently as last year, Joe was our president, and then I took over at the beginning of this year. And so it's really been the Brown legacy over the past 35, almost 40 years now that has carried us into the 21st century and really continued to keep the business vibrant and moving forward. So today, the Brown family, Jim Brown III and Joe Brown, own an operating company called Tailwind Technologies. It's the parent company. And within that, Hartzell Propeller here in Piqua is the largest operating company. We also have a sister company down in Montgomery, Alabama called Hartzell Engine Technologies. And then we have a couple of new additions, AWI AMI, which is a manufacturing and welding company for general aviation up in Minnesota, as well as QAA, which is a distributor and overhaul shop down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. All of the facilities, all the different businesses run as standalone, and they all are focused in the general aviation sector of the larger aerospace market. Here in Piqua, Ohio, we have about 265 employees. Really about half of that is in our manufacturing organization, and another 40 strong in our engineering and technical group. We really identify ourselves as a design and manufacturing company, and carrying that staff of 40 engineers and technical folks is really one of the things that sets us apart from our competitors, because we're able to design specifically to the flight profile of the airplane and the engine, and put a prop on there that is going to maximize performance in whatever flight regime the customer is looking for, whether that's takeoff or climb or cruise speed, wanting to go fast. Our facilities here in Piqua, as Jessica mentioned, we are fully contained here in the Piqua city proper. So we have our main machining and assembly plant here is almost 200,000 square feet that you saw a picture of. We have a composite facility, a de-ice facility, and an engineering test lab, which is where we do all of our certification work for FAA and to launch new products into market. And I wanted to pause there because in 2017, we actually celebrated our 100th anniversary, and we put together a video with our partners actually down at the Ullman Group in Dayton, is our good friends and marketing agency partner, and they helped us really try to memorialize 100 years of aviation for Hartzell Propeller. And it gives you a really strong sense of more of who we are and the people behind the scenes here, and what we do and why we're so passionate about it. So I wanted to, if you would bear with me, it's about a 10-minute video. And again, it's about 3 years old, but it really does a nice job giving you a little more flavor for our culture and our people, and why we're so passionate about what we do. So Jessica, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to have you roll that video, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about our business and some of our customers and go from there. Okay, so again, I appreciate you indulging me in that 10 minutes, a little bit more about our history. And again, it was a celebration of our 100th anniversary. And then, as you saw in the wrap up there, that was Jim Brown Jr., who unfortunately passed away in 2018. But obviously his legacy is carried forward through Jim III and Joe and humbly myself as we carry this forward. So I wanted to just continue talking a little bit more about what we do here. And I hope that left you with a sense for a little bit about who we are. So what we do today is variable pitch constant speed propellers, governors, and spinners. We're in the single and multi-engine pusher and tractor applications, meaning the props can either be on the front of the airplane in front of the engine like you see there, or the prop can be mounted to the back of the airplane or to the back side of a wing with a behind the engine in a pusher configuration. We're really cutting across a bunch of different categories of general aviation, whether that's personal or utility, aerobatic, some small commuters, and definitely military applications. We fit our props to both piston and turboprop engines, anywhere from 80 horsepower all the way up to over 2,000 shaft horsepower. We are 2 to 6 blades in an aluminum or a steel hub configuration, and we use aluminum blades as well as carbon fiber composite blades for our production. Some of our notable firsts, thinking through our innovation history, 1917, again, you have the Dayton Wright Airplane Company. Fast forward to 1978, we certified the first structural composite propeller to hit market. That's a CASA 212 there up in the top middle. 1993, we certified our largest propeller. It's about a 12-foot diameter, 6-bladed composite on the Dornier 328. 2006, we actually launched a next generation composite process, and that's a Cirrus SR22. And then 2012, so almost 10 years ago now, we started to get into the UAV market with some military contractors here domestically, and we continue to see that business grow today. Some of our, like I said, our horsepower range goes anything from the top right-hand side, which is a kit-built home manufactured aircraft called a Vans aircraft in the 200 horsepower range. The bottom left is a Mooney, bottom right is a TBM around 750, 800 horsepower, and then at the top left is a King Air 200, which gets up into the 1,000 horsepower plus range. So pretty broad spectrum in terms of our product portfolio and which aircraft we partner with. Again, a little bit more about our customers, anywhere from agricultural aircraft like air tractor and thrush into personal aircraft, Cirrus, TBMs, the whole fleet of Textron airplanes on the propeller side, meaning 182s, Barons, Bonanzas, King Airs, that whole line, to some of the personal and backcountry like Cub Crafters, and then into some of the bigger guys like Pilatus, the PC-12, PC-21, that sort of thing. So again, a pretty wide swath across the general aviation landscape. One of the interesting things, we hosted some government officials a couple years ago, and we did a little research and found that we actually have more type certificate data on file with the FAA than any other company in the world, you know, including the Boeings and the Embraers and the big companies like Textron. We actually have more type certificate data on file than anyone, because we have about 60 unique propellers TC'd and many versions of those under those TCs. So that's really important to us to be able to certify and file that data with the FAA, and then to bring those products to market. And we just like to show pictures of airplanes. So it's another opportunity to show you a bunch of different airplanes that we partner with and put our props on. From a sales overview, we're about 50% new propellers out the door and about 50% aftermarket parts and service. Geographically, about 2/3 of our props ship domestically within the US, and about 1/3 outside of the US, but we're really a global company. So many of the airplanes that get Hartzell props here in the US get exported to international markets all over the world, and our sales force is certainly canvassing the globe to support and reach out to new customers. All in all, we do about 3,000 propellers out the door a year, so call it 60, 70 a week, somewhere in that ballpark. And as you saw from the video, we're really passionate about flying, not just about designing propellers, but we really are passionate about flying. I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of. We have a flying club with a couple of planes. We make it super affordable for our employees to learn to fly and to continue flying. We also use TBM aircraft, which you see in the top picture there, for business travel here. So certainly we're using propeller-driven aircraft for our business travel. We have a few of those that we put quite a few hours on a year. We have about 20 active pilots, so almost 10% of our employee base are pilots. And we have our own airport that we manage with some hangars where we have employee-built aircraft. We host EAA meetings, Experimental Aviation Association meetings every month. And then as you saw from the video, we have some pretty good friends that are some top tier air show performers, including Michael Goulian, whose airplane you see there at the bottom, and Sean Tucker and Matt Chapman and others. So we're really passionate about this. And again, I think being able to channel that passion into our design and manufacturer is something that's really special to me and to our employees. So in terms of our business, I would call out a few things in general. So set aside COVID, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but in our slice of the world, general aviation, what we're seeing the past several years is composite technology is winning and winning big. Aftermarket trends are stable, competitive landscape's dynamic, and cost pressures continue. So let me briefly give you a little more color on those. So composite technology, when I started 8 years ago, we employed 6 people at our composite facility, and we were doing about 500 blades a year. So to this year, 2020, we're going to finish up producing almost 4,000 composite blades. So about 8 times as many as we did when I started, and we're up to 30 people down at our composite facility. And I would remind you that our industry, so general aviation, the growth trend has been extremely flat. So it's a pretty mature industry. There's about 1,600 to 1,700 new airplanes in the general aviation space delivered every year. And we're capturing about 85% market share. But what we're seeing is a dramatic shift from metal blades to composite. And that's really where a lot of our investment has been over the past 5 to 8 years, has been in composite technology and blade design, so that we can continue to capture that market share and trade customers from aluminum to composite. Aftermarket trends are stable. That just means we have a pretty solid underlying aftermarket portfolio, which includes repair and overhaul kits, blades, hubs, components for propellers. There is a standard time between overhaul on every propeller, as well as engines and airplanes, and really everything that goes into aircraft. But our typical time between overhauls are anywhere from 4 to 6 years. And so we see a nice, stable underlying business of repair and overhaul in that category. Competitive landscape is dynamic. That's really just code for we have one big competitor and a couple of smaller ones, and we're trying to beat them up, and they're trying to beat us up. And so our biggest competitor is actually a company in Germany called MT Propeller. They actually use a technology that is where we started back in the early 1900s. They use a wood core and then basically route that into an airfoil shape and overlay one layer of glass or composite material. And they like to call that a natural composite, which sounds really great in the market until you show a customer what that really means, and you show them a cross section of a blade, and they say, no, I don't have the wood, I have the natural composite. And we say, yep, that's right, that's what you have. And so whereas we're using carbon fiber, structural composite, very, very strong, 5 to 10 times stronger than the wood core. We've done a ton of education over the past 6-8 years trying to make sure our customers in the market know the differences and know their choices. And then, of course, as I'm sure many of you are seeing, we have cost pressures every year, and some years are worse than others, and some of our raw materials are moving more quickly than others, but certainly, we're going to continue to make sure that we're doing everything we can in that area. We have about 75% of our spend under long-term agreements, and that's especially important with some of the volatility we've seen in the the steel and the aluminum markets this past 12 to 18 months, and we're certainly trying to be as proactive as we can to control cost. So in a market where we have very high market share and the overall market is generally flat, how do we grow our footprint? So we really try to do three things a little bit better than our competition. We provide best-in-class service and support. We invest in manufacturing technology, and then we're constantly innovating our product portfolio. Those three things are really been the key to our success, and we'll continue down that route here as our years unfold. So I'll take those one at a time. Customer service, product support. We have a really strong group there. You see in the picture of tech reps who do a couple things. First of all, we have a 24/7 accident on ground support line, meaning if there's an aircraft that needs our help from a propeller standpoint, somebody will answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is, believe it or not, a big differentiation from our competitors. And that's, I'm really proud that we still offer that service. It goes straight to whoever has the phone, forwarded to them anytime, day or night. In that group, we also host training classes here at our facility in Piqua for prop shops around the world to come in and learn how to overhaul their propellers and how to take care of them. And we also send our folks out into the field to help address any service issues or to actually do trainings at customer locations so that they don't have to always send their propellers back to Piqua. Along with that, we have a really strong worldwide service center network. It's almost 30 repair stations now that we call Hartzell recommended service facilities. So no financial ties to them, but we audit those independent shops every 3 years, make sure that their standards for overhaul and repair are meeting our quality standards, which in almost every case is higher than the governing authority for that area's standards. And we will channel local business in their regions to them. So if a customer in Australia calls us and says, hey, I need my prop work done, we say, hey, we want to send you to West Coast props or East Coast props right there in Australia and get you back into the air as soon as possible. We also have our own factory service center here in Piqua. We have about 20 folks in our service center, and we're more than happy to look after and care for and repair and overhaul propellers if customers choose to have the factory do their overhaul and repair. So that's the first thing we do to try to set ourselves apart, is all around customer service and product support. Secondly, we're really invested in manufacturing technology. Again, in the video, you saw a few examples of our robotics. We're heavily invested in robotics. And I would say, some of our key tenets around manufacturing are, first of all, we want to hire and train world-class employees. We really think about lean manufacturing, product-oriented cellular footprint, meaning a piece of raw material will go into a cell where it will run on a main machining spindle, usually an Integrex type of machine. We're partnered with Mazak, who is right down in Cincinnati, Covington, Kentucky, for their U.S. headquarters. And so we have quite a bit of Mazak hardware where we're running main spindles. And so then that raw material will travel around several different machines in a very small footprint, including a CMM where it'll get checked for dimensional inspection and then be ready to go to stock as it comes out of that little cell. That's really important to us. It really keeps our flow moving along, and it's something that we really believe is around cellular manufacturing. And then highly automated processes, and that's how we're integrating robotics for loading and unloading. And we're also starting to integrate the CMM dimensional inspection right into our automation. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but really what it's saying is, back in the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of guys and ladies doing a lot of manual machine processes on lathes and routers and whatnot, and checking with templates and rechecking and grinding a little bit more and machining a little bit more. And as we started to invest in technology over the past 25 years, what we migrated to was more of the automated processes. So high performance cells, automated inspections, robotics. 2008 was our first robotic implementation. And what we do now in 2020 is, again, the perfect dance chart for us is a cell where a piece of raw material will start on one spindle in one machine. It'll be automatically loaded. It'll come out. It'll be washed, dried by the robot. It'll go to a CMM bench where it'll be inspected. As long as it's within tolerance, it'll go on to the next machining operation and go on to phase 2, while another part gets loaded into the first spindle for continuing machining. So at the end of the day, we can have, call it 40, 50 parts between where we push go, and when we come back, from a Sunday, from a, let's say a Friday afternoon, we'll push the go button, and we'll come back Saturday afternoon, load a new cart into the cell, and have another 50 parts when we come back on Sunday night for night shift. So, and by the way, it's being checked all the way through because we maintain such tight tolerances. If anything starts to go out of bounds from a tolerance standpoint, one of our manufacturing services operator will get an automatic message to their phone, and they can decide whether they want to keep the system running or do some offsets to the machine right off of their phone and keep things flowing. So high performance automation is really where we're going to. And really our philosophy is we want to make as many of our components as we can in-house. So, we used to have 30 guys grinding on blades to get the right airfoil dimensions. Well, we've automated almost all of those processes now on airfoil, and we've redeployed those folks to other cells where we can make other components and reduce cost, increase quality, which is our #1 goal, and be on time to our customers. So our manufacturing philosophy has always been quality parts on time with shorter lead times and lower cost, and that's served us well, and we'll continue to run that playbook in the future. And then finally, innovation has really been our lifeblood for over 100 years, and that starts with our best resource, which is our engineering group and our technical group, and really the men and women behind the designs that we're bringing to market. We have a ton of institutional knowledge, and I'm sure as many of you are out there, one of the things that we're doing right now and over the next 5 years is making sure that as these folks get ready to retire, that we're bringing in a new generation of workforce to learn from them, understand all their expertise, all their institutional knowledge, make sure we're documenting it and preserving it so that we can continue to build off of it for the future. We have a ton of people who have 25, 30, 40 years sometimes. And my biggest challenge, one of my biggest challenges is trying to make sure that we're maintaining that level of expertise and knowledge as we move forward. One of the ways we do that is we actually are able to self-certify our products. So we have what's called an ODA, so an Organizational Delegation of Authority with the FAA, where we're able to initiate plans and carry those plans out for type certificate and supplemental type certificate work with the FAA. So we will write the test plan for certification, we'll send it to the FAA, they will bless it, we will carry out the testing, and then report our findings, and they will officially issue us a type certificate. So it's a way that we can control our own destiny with certification. And at our test lab, right now we're running about 8 different tests with new parts to continue to travel down the road of certification. So again, it's really important to us to be able to do that because that's our lifeblood. That's how we get to market, not only in a quality way, but also a little bit faster than our competition. And I mentioned composite. I just wanted to say, look, this is where the future is heading, whether it's with, hybrid electric types of power plants. We're working with a handful of battery and motor companies to start to integrate, away from traditional power plants like, the aviation engines, whether it's Pratt & Whitney or Lycoming or Continental, and into a hybrid or full electric type of power plant with a motor. And so, this is one of the areas where, if you think of around World War II and all the investment that happened and all the spool up that happened around aircraft production and innovation and certification, to me, this is the most exciting piece of the business right now, because all the investment happening in the electric and hybrid and autonomous vehicle space is really unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like that since, I'll say, World War II. And so for us, the challenge is understanding who to partner with, who has a decent chance of getting something actually to market, and how long that timeline might look like. So being a relatively small company, we can't invest with everyone. It's just not economically feasible, and we don't have enough resources internally to do that. So we're using our industry contacts, we're using our own ingenuity and our own sort of expertise to say, yep, let's partner with these 6 or 8 folks. And we think, over the course of the next 2, 4, 10 years, maybe we'll see some pretty strong product launches and really reinvigorate a market in general aviation that has been pretty flat. So again, really exciting. We've been doing composites for a long time, and to me, that technology and that part of our business is really going to be the key to future growth and continued innovation. So I want to pause there, and I have a few more slides that talk about composites, but I'll go ahead and pause there and wrap up. I wanted to, Jessica asked me to mention COVID and what our response to that has been. And what I would say is that obviously, as we've all seen, it's been a pretty unprecedented year. And from about the middle of March on, it's been, trying to create a new playbook daily, hourly, weekly, to make sure that we're addressing first and foremost, our employees' health and obviously dealing with our customers and making sure that we're getting them what they need. Just a quick, I guess, 30-second blurb on how it's gone for us. The first quarter, we were off to a really, really strong start. We were on track for probably our highest revenue year in history. Second quarter, call it middle of March, 1st of April, customers started calling us and canceling orders faster than we can answer the phone or answer emails. And so our business was down about 40% in the second quarter. And what we've seen since then, thankfully, has been a pretty strong rebound. So whereas commercial aviation is really struggling, and obviously flights on commercial aviation continue to be down 90% versus sort of the historic numbers, general aviation has come back pretty strong. People still want to get their families places. Business travel is still happening. And so there's been a pretty strong influx of interest in buying airplanes at the general aviation level, whether that's personal aircraft like Cirrus or some of the business aircraft like PC-12. So we've come back. We're not back to the run rate of where we thought we'd be, but we're probably, within 10% of it here in the back half of the year. And we're looking towards a very strong wrap up and a very solid launch into 2021. So that's kind of the business side. The personnel side, as many of you, all of you, I'm sure did, we took a bunch of measures: cleaning, sanitization, masks, working from home, working remotely, to make sure our workforce stayed as healthy and safe as possible. And that continues to be my #1 goal as we move forward, especially since we're seeing the spike here in Ohio. So, in all honesty, right now is we're at our highest numbers of folks out of the building, whether it's for themselves not feeling well or their family members or their, a kid, somebody that lives with them. If anybody in their household that they live with is exhibiting symptoms, then they need to stay away. So we're, about 10% of our workforce right now. So, as we speak, we're, I would say, at the peak from a COVID standpoint. So Jessica, I hope that wasn't too long. I hope folks at least enjoyed a little bit learning a little bit more about what we do and how we do it here at Hartzell Prop. I'd be happy to talk through any questions or highlight or go into more details on anything that I might have covered.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. I really appreciate that. So we've had some questions come through, but please send some in if you had a question about anything he mentioned or perhaps some of the COVID stuff. I think it's really neat. JJ, I was telling you yesterday that I grew up here. My grandfather was part of the pilots club at Wright Brothers Airport, and I actually found a picture last night when I was getting ready to fly with him. I don't know if it was a Hartzell Propeller. I'll have to send it off to you to see if it is, but definitely a nostalgic moment there. So some of the questions, one of the questions that came in, so approximately what percent of the market does the propeller sector have? And are sales US based or worldwide?
So for sure, it's a worldwide market. Defining the market is a little bit elusive. It really depends on how large you want to go. So, propellers generally go from very small horsepower, call it 50, 60, 80 horsepower type of engines, all the way up to and including, call it 5,000 horsepower. You know, if you're talking about big C-130 type transports for the military, or some of the rather large commuter aircraft that fly, the Havilland Dash 8s, that sort of thing. So I would say, you know, once you start getting into the jet world, prices escalate very quickly, right? So a typical propeller-driven airplane is going to be, gosh, a turboprop is anywhere from $3 million to maybe $10 million. So when you think about the actual acquisition cost of the aircraft, you're talking in that range for something that's got a propeller on it. When you start talking about jets, I mean, it gets into the hundreds of millions of dollars very quickly. And certainly there are some light jets in the $4 million, $5 million range, but to really think about a revenue type of world in the total aviation business, commercial aviation obviously is massive. So if we look at just general aviation, which includes business jets and personal jets, I'm going to guess, and I stress guess, that the propeller side, the propeller-driven aircraft, as a percentage of general aviation, including private jets, is probably 20% at the most. So, you know, I'd say we're fighting for a rather small piece of a rather large pie. But the interesting thing is that turboprop aircraft, so propeller-driven turboprops, are bar none the most efficient, cost-effective means of transportation when compared to small jets. So you can go just as fast in many cases as a small jet for half of the operating cost because you're not burning as much fuel.
Thank you. And next question. Do you anticipate a play for Hartzell Propeller in the newly emerging flying car industry? We'll use car sort of broadly as some sort of autonomous vehicle of some sort.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I mean, we'd be crazy, you know, we've had a history of innovation. We'd be crazy not to be paying attention to what's going on with autonomous vehicles, with hybrid electric. And so I think that what we'll see over the shorter term is some of the existing aircraft, whether that's Cessna Caravans or Cirrus SR-22s, or some of the existing aircraft that are flying today will start to convert to hybrid electric type of technology power plants. And we are actively working on more than a handful of platforms with motor companies and with battery companies and with integrators who are looking to take existing airframes and really transform them into a much more economical and less, you know, energy consumption type of vehicle. So that's probably what's going to happen first, because we have all of the rules and regulations in place to regulate the airspace and monitor and keep everybody safe. And it's really an existing airplane that just uses a different power source. I think the next wave after that, which would include flying cars and UAVs and you know, more of the Uber Elevate model, which is you know, a flying taxi, if you will. I think we're at least a decade away from any sort of meaningful launch of that, but that's not to say we're not interested in it, and we are working on it today. So you know, there's companies like Bell, there's companies like Uber that are working and investing right now in that space, and we're working with those companies and others to try to make sure that our technology is going to partner up and pair with how they want to, you know, to move those aircraft around. So there's a lot to be discovered in terms of how we keep the airspace safe and regulated, what those rules are. You know, we're working with FAA. One of the relationships we have is with the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, which is GAMA, and it's a global industry association that really works with governing bodies like FAA here in the States as well as in Europe and across the world to make sure that regulations are consistent and safe and really proactive to help develop the types of things that we're going to need to to be able to facilitate flying cars and autonomous flying vehicles. So it's a long-winded version of saying, yes, we're partnering our technology with companies that are investing in that space today. You know, there's literally 150 different projects out there right now in that space, and probably 2 of them or 3 of them will get to market maybe 10, 15 years down the road.
Great, thank you. And then real quick, you may have touched on this, and I know I saw it on your website. What about propellers used for wind turbine power generation?
So that's a space that we aren't in, and it's been mostly for one big reason: is our machinery and our equipment isn't scoped and it can't handle the length of the blades needed for those big wind turbines. The other thing, you know, to be honest, we carry quite a bit of overhead because everything we do is certified. And in really the wind turbine market, you don't need to be certified, and the structural technology is not nearly as robust as what it would take to put something on an airplane. So it's hard for us to compete on cost. And certainly when you're talking about, you know, a 30-foot long blade, we don't have the capability in-house right now to make anything of that size. But I would say we've certainly spent some time in that, thinking through that and what it would take to maybe put a standalone facility together that can make a low-cost blade, knowing that there's going to be a continued market for that, you know, in the future.
And I think this might be our last question. And JJ, you and I actually talked about this on Wednesday. We have a question here first said, thank you for sharing your story. It's a good one for not just the Dayton region, but the state of Ohio. Can you expand a little bit in your challenges with workforce development, maybe outside of just the COVID issue, in terms of you've got a lot of people with a lot of experience, and what's that turnover going to look like? And are there any specific trades or occupations where you're most concerned about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that keeps me up at night, honestly. You know, we look at our 5-year succession planning, and we're expecting to retire out, you know, on their own terms, obviously, about 50 people that we really value and that we don't want to lose, but you know, they want to move on to retirement. And the institutional knowledge that those folks have, whether it's machinists on the floor or programmers in the shop, or design engineers or process engineers, some of our senior sales folks, we have a pretty big talent drain that I spend a lot of time trying to work through how we're going to bridge that gap. One of the most difficult positions to hire over the past few years has been skilled machinists, and we've gone through some pretty nice growth. Call it since the end of 2017, we've had some pretty nice growth, and so we've actually hired about 60 people and retired about 20. So we're up about a net 40 people over the past 2 years, and we were able to sustain our full workforce through the COVID downturn. I'm skipping around a little bit, but what I would say is that, you know, we're backfilling and providing overlaps for folks in the, call it minimum 6 months, sometimes 2 years type of range, to make sure that we're transferring over the knowledge base and the skills. We've had a hard time hiring machinists. We've partnered with the local trade schools to try to get some folks right out of school that we can bring in. We really encourage folks to go to the Step 2 program at Sinclair. It's been a great training and hiring resource for us. Up here in Pickle, we have the JVS, who's offering some machining classes. So, you know, I would say working with the local trade schools and really keying in on machinists, who are a large, call it, we have 40 strong machinists here. So that's a pool of talent that I spend a lot of time making sure we're growing. On the engineering side, again, the institutional knowledge, we're going after folks that in many cases are a 1 to 1.5 year type of overlap to really learn the business and learn the ins and outs of the design. So I think, you know, for me, it's a constantly evolving puzzle, and so we're only as good as the people that work for us. And so again, my main mission has been to keep folks engaged through this COVID and keep them encouraged through the crisis, and certainly keep our eye on the longer term prize, which is you know, a highly effective workforce for the long term. So it's been a challenge, especially the past 6 months, but it's one that will continue on in here the next several years as the succession plan plays out.
Thanks, JJ. And you are not alone. We hear from employers a lot that workforce development keeps them up at night. I'm glad to hear that you are partnering with the trade schools, both Sinclair down here and maybe up north where you are, because that's a great way to get these kids in early, right? And then match them up with your more experienced employees. So thank you. And thank you for sharing your story with us. I was telling JJ, I was not very familiar with Hartzell Propeller, so it was really fun to talk with him. And that was a great video to show sort of how they evolved over the years. So great Dayton and great Ohio story. I just have a few quick announcements before we adjourn virtually. And it's mostly just to tell you about our upcoming events. If you've registered for Legislative Reception, which is Monday, November 16th, it has been moved to a virtual format. But if you haven't registered, now there's more time to register. So make sure you do that, and then you'll also receive an email for a link so you can access that virtual platform. And then next Thursday, we have safety breakfast with the experts on a very sobering topic of concussions and traumatic brain injuries. Sort of opposite of that, what might give you a headache this season is holiday shopping. We are still encouraging shoppers and our members to shop small safely through the whole holiday season. You know, Small Business Saturday is typically that Saturday after Thanksgiving, but we want to make sure our retail stays open. So please do so safely. Consider contact with ordering and pickup, and keep an eye on the Chamber's social media pages, because we're going to be featuring some of those small retail and restaurant shops that hopefully you'll spend your money with. And then lastly, we are doing a December breakfast briefing this year, which is not typical, but because we had to cancel some with COVID, we wanted to give you guys an extra month. And we are going to be talking with John McKenzie, president of Wind Supply and Wind Supply Support Services Group. He also just took the helm as president this year, so certainly a year of transition for him as well. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for taking time to be with us this morning on a Friday morning. I hope you have a great weekend, and thank you again to our sponsors, CareWorks, Pickerel, Schaefer, and Ebling, and Benefits Network Insurance. Thank you again, JJ. Take care, everyone.